Welcome to the first ever episode of the Smarter Than Last Time podcast. This podcast is all things nutrition, mental health, financial health, physical health, anything to do with health or fitness or training. This podcast is going to be the podcast for you. I'm going to share my experiences and how you can benefit from them. And so let's get right into it. My first episode is going to be my worst diet mistakes, and I think it's going to be pretty intriguing, and you guys are going to get to know me a little bit better, bit by bit, and this seems like a really good starting point. So my first diet mistake ever is just eating too little. So when I first went on a diet a couple of years back, I bulked up, I was doing a cut, I didn't really know what I was doing, and what happened was I was just being really overly strict. I didn't know that what I was doing was hurting my body, because what happens is when you eat too little, your metabolic rate actually drops. So even after your diet, it makes it that much easier to gain the weight back on after the fact. So I was in 1,000 calorie, 1,500 calorie deficit, thinking I'm doing my body good, but the reality is that I was not doing my body a service. In fact, I was doing my body a disservice. Now, my next diet mistake is going keto. So the ketogenic diet is great for some people, they swear by it, but my personal opinion is quite different from that. I honestly feel like the diet lacks a lot of just basic things you need to live. The micronutrient intake is obviously very low. Some would argue, but I get all this B12 from the meat, all this creatine, just a slew of B vitamins and grain vitamins, etc. But the reality is you're not getting as many nutrients, micronutrients, as you would if you were eating, let's say, fruits, eating enough vegetables, eating enough natural carbohydrates, and that's just the way it is. So to be straightforward with you guys, my experience on the keto was kind of I'm just going to eat meat and protein shakes and nothing else, and that's it. And what that did was it helped me lose weight really fast, but it was really bad for my health, and it was bad for my mental health, because I didn't realize the damage I was doing just by restricting so many calories, and the effect it had on my brain because I was so young, and the effect that it had on my self-image, even just getting shredded for the first time, being able to see my abs, and I was like, wow, this is so great, and I just wanted that to continue. So I just kept dieting down. It did. My abs got more sharp, but I was getting way too lean. So I started to introduce more calories and learn a little bit more about nutrition, and I was well on my way to a healthy diet. Which leads me to my next point, is going into a diet and not knowing enough about nutrition. So when I first started the keto diet, I really didn't know what I was doing. I knew my dad was a bodybuilder at one point, and he swore by it. Mind you, he was enhanced. He was using enhancement supplements to increase his physiological potential, and I was not. So I was going into a natural, going into an unnatural bodybuilder's cutting diet, thinking that I was doing my body a service. Again, when in fact I was not. So I wouldn't recommend this to anyone else, and always be willing to listen to people too. I wasn't really willing to listen to anyone, because I just thought I read a couple books and I knew what I was talking about, and all other information could be pretty much disregarded. But this was not the case at all. So always listen to other people, do your research on the advice you're given before you implement it, and then if you find out the advice is in fact good advice, then implement that. My next point is being overly strict with my diet. So being overly strict can have a really poor impact, especially for me. Personally, I found my desire to eat food literally just dropped because I was being so strict that I got sick of eating certain foods. I would literally just eat the same few meals every day, the same sort of keto-based things. I'd have my ground beef, eggs, and a little bit of cheese and protein shakes, and that kind of went on for a couple months, like I said before. But it really wasn't a healthy approach. I wasn't getting in enough calories, and when I finally did come off the keto diet, I went on a binge for a couple weeks where I literally gained back some of the fat that I lost, and I lost a lot of definition in my abs, and it was just a really bad experience overall. So don't be too strict with your diet. Incorporate foods that you like to eat, and you should be a lot more successful. My next diet mistake is not eating enough protein. So when I was on the keto diet, it's all about fat, right? Everyone swears by it, get enough fat, carbs are bad, carbs are the devil, sugar is the devil, but that's not the case at all. What really is the case is everything is good in its own right. So as far as not eating enough protein, I would eat a lot of eggs. I leave the yolk in. I would eat a lot of very fatty meat, a lot of pork, a lot of beef, and just to kind of stay in ketosis, because I didn't want to go into I heard about glucogenesis, which is when your body turns protein into glucose, and this is perfectly natural. It happens all the time. It's a natural process your body does, and it was definitely something that actually was, in fact, taking place on my keto diet. Whether or not I like to acknowledge it at the time, because in my head, I was like, no, I'm in ketosis all the time. I'm going to stay in ketosis, and this is the base. This is where I should be, and this is the fat-burning zone. And it's super anabolic because I'm eating all this meat, and I'm losing weight, and it's great. But in reality, that was not the case at all, and I was just being too strict, and I wasn't getting enough protein in. I wasn't incorporating high protein foods, micronutrient dense foods, and it was really just a lacking diet overall. So when I would work out, the gains I was getting were great. They were beginner gains. I was starting to see a lot of definition, but I wasn't seeing a lot of muscle growth. And I attribute that to the fact that there just wasn't enough protein in my body for the muscle growth to take place. And then another problem that I had when I first started getting into dieting was overtraining. So I would hit the gym, and as most beginner lifters do, I would mostly only hit my upper body. I didn't do legs at all. I would train my abs all the time, and I would train my biceps every single day, which I don't really think played in my favor. When I started to see the most growth was when I started doing more like a push-pull leg split, and I've been doing variations of that ever since, and that's kind of what's worked best for me. And another thing is not taking the cardio too seriously. So you don't have to, when you hit the gym, you don't have to hop on the treadmill and try and burn 1,000 calories every time like me, or like what I was doing, because it's super counterintuitive to muscle growth. It'll put you in a really catabolic state, and any muscle protein synthesis that you might have sparked up in the beginning of your workout is now being terminated, as all your gains are being used to feed the energy of your brutal cardio workout. And then my last worst nutrition mistake is eating too much. So when I first started getting into bulking and cutting, my first ever bulk was way too heavy. So I would eat insane amounts of food, all the time. I would eat, and I was putting on size, and I was looking good. I was in my second last year of high school when I really started to see progress in my first bulk. But by the end of that year, I really noticed that I had gained quite a bit of fat alongside the muscles. So I started around 11% body fat, and then, it was 10% body fat, and then by the end of that year, I bulked for the whole year. I was up to 16, 17% body fat, and then I had to shred that all down in the summer, which kind of worked out in my favor because I was doing a fitness competition to see the progress starting from, when was it? Starting from June until September. And so having gained that muscle and then being a little fluffy and having to shed it out and losing the weight, honestly, at the end, it did look great. But I feel like I could have made a lot more gains, and I could have done a lot better. Better definition everywhere, better definition in my arms, my chest, my abs, everything, if I had just stuck to a lower gaining rate and not gone so crazy and so overboard with the calories and hyperprotein focus. So that's it for my worst diet mistakes, and I hope you guys took something from this. I hope you learned something from this, and I look forward to seeing you guys again on Wednesday. Peace.